Hi, Tony DeWitt here, Missouri appellate attorney and a guy who likes to make the law make sense on YouTube. Now, today we're going to talk about the New Mexico governor's order and its sort of far-reaching implications. I'm going to state my bias up front. I am a Second Amendment absolutist. I believe that the Second Amendment protects every citizen's right to own and carry firearms, so long as they have not become a felon or a domestic abuser or a drug addict or a drunk that is, basically unsafe with a weapon. In other words, I believe very strongly that good people should be able to carry and defend themselves. That doesn't mean that everybody should carry. Right? It means that the people who have that desire and who are willing to put in the time to train, learn the law, and understand the operation of their firearms, those people should have a right to do that. I am not somebody who believes that there should be no limitations. I certainly think that, we ought to have some standards for keeping schools safe. And I think we ought to have some standards for keeping courthouses, sheriff's offices, and airports safe. I don't have a problem with restricting firearms in those locations. And of course, neither did the Supreme Court. But this is a case where the governor has declared a public health emergency for 30 days. There are a number of reasons to sort of doubt the efficacy of that. Let's take a look real quickly at what the governor actually said. Here is what the governor had to say at her press conference.
All right. Thank you, Caroline. Thank you, Maddie. I want to thank members of the press for joining us today. I'm going to announce today the details of our public health order that work in concert with the fact that we declared a gun violence public health emergency as an epidemic yesterday. Now, the meat of it, which is why you're here, is what's in that order, but first, I want to make some introductions. That's occurred in that way because we all are resource limited. So we've determined today, and I want to thank you, and I'll introduce everyone around the table, that we don't need any more resource limitations conversations. We need to use the power of a public health and a state of emergency to access different levers, different resources, and different opportunities to keep New Mexicans safe.
And this is the governor detailing what's in her public health order here.
Which is effective today, September 8th, which lasts 30 days. And then we'll, like all the other public health orders, we will either amend or renew or adjust, depending upon where we are. So effective immediately, no person other than a law enforcement officer or licensed security officer shall possess a firearm, either openly or concealed, within cities or counties, averaging 1,000 or more violent crimes per 100,000, and more than 90 firearm-related emergency department visits. So to put that in sort of a layman's terms, for 30 days in Albuquerque and Bernallilo County, it's the only place that meets both those standards. Statewide order, but only one place meets both criteria, where we have far too many ER gunshot visits and we have far too many crimes involving firearms. We are suspending open and concealed carry. The purpose is to try to create a cooling off period while we figure out how we can better address public safety and gun violence. Now,
okay, this makes absolutely no sense. Again, let me explain why. One of the reasons it makes absolutely no sense is because the people who are engaging in gun violence, they are not your concealed carriers or your open carriers. As the governor had previously said in this conference, they're the young people, the young men and women who are in gangs, who are engaged in gang violence, and that's what's causing the problem. In essence, what the governor is doing is disarming the law-abiding in order to have an effect on the people who don't obey the law. The other day, they had a shooting where somebody cut somebody off in traffic, and a person jumped out of the vehicle and emptied 17 rounds into the vehicle, killing a child in the vehicle. Now, that's a tragedy, but the gun is not to blame. It is the hoodlum who pulled the trigger who is to blame. But let's look at it from a realistic standpoint. Is somebody who's going to fire 17 rounds into a van because they got upset, is that somebody who is going to, in any way, shape, or form, obey what amounts to a public health emergency order and not carry their gun? Of course not, because criminals do not obey the law. That's what makes them criminals. You know, people who are in support of the Second Amendment make this argument all the time, and I have yet to hear a decent response to it. If all you're doing here is limiting the people who obey the law to not carrying guns, what you are doing is you are saying to the criminals and the thugs and the bandits and the robbers out there, hey, guess what? You don't have any competition now. Go up to that person at the ATM, stick a gun in their side, take their money. They're not going to have their gun. They can't shoot you. Rob to your heart's content. Now, to be fair, that's not what the governor is trying to say. And I will give her credit. I do think that she is trying very hard to solve a public health emergency without spending money. And this is one way that she thinks she can do it. You notice the tip of the hat there in the press conference to being resource limited. Okay, so you're resource limited. I get that. The problem is not that you don't have sufficient resources. The problem is that you are not attacking the problem in the way that makes sense. I would be willing to bet you that if you looked at the statistics in New Mexico for prosecutions of gun crimes under the federal law, there would be very, very few of those. If you use a firearm to commit a criminal act in any state, that's a violation of federal law, and you can and should be prosecuted for it, and you should be able to draw the maximum sentence if you harm someone. For whatever reason, the federal prosecutors in lots of different jurisdictions just don't file gun crime charges. Or, when they do, they will file a gun crime charge on a drug dealer. He was trafficking drugs across the border, and when we caught him, he had a .45 pistol stuck in his pants. Now, when they sit down with the public defender to negotiate a plea deal, the first charge that gets thrown in the trash can is what? The gun charge. That should be the last thing thrown in the garbage can, because that's what facilitates the criminal act in the first place. If he couldn't go armed, he couldn't transport drugs because some other drug dealer would take them away from him. So you have to look at the root causes of most of this and most of this violence and attack those root causes. And it's like hanging Judge Parker, who was the judge in Fort Smith, Arkansas in the 1800s. He said, it is not the severity of punishment that deters crime, it's the certainty of it. And we have removed this element of certainty of punishment. It has become a big game of let's make a deal. And the police agencies and the local prosecutors could very easily turf these cases up to the federal government, tee them up, and get them prosecuted in federal court, but they don't do it. Now, is it a resource limitation? The federal government has plenty of money to give lots of arms to Ukraine. You're telling me it doesn't have enough money to prosecute felons? That doesn't make too much sense to me. Fortunately for the citizens of the state of New Mexico, and particularly the citizens of Bernallilo County has a sheriff. And let's see what he has to say about this.
Right, first of all, thank you for coming to this press conference. Once I read a short statement, I will answer some questions. As we all know, Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham issued an emergency temporary temporarily suspending open and concealed carry laws for the next 30 days in Bernallilo County. Let me start by saying I'm holding this press conference and to answer many other people's questions, not only on social media, but directly to my phone. One, this is not grandstanding, nor is this to bring attention to myself. We must always remember, not only are we protecting the Second Amendment, but at the same time, we have a lot of violence within our community. Let me be clear. I hold my standards high, and I do not, or never will, hedge on what is right. And I take my oath seriously. In reference to concealed carry and open carry, the Bernallilo County Sheriff's Office will not enforce this segment of the order. While I understand the urgency, the temporary ban challenges the foundations of our Constitution, but most importantly, it is unconstitutional. My oath was to protect the Constitution, and that is what I will do. The governor made it clear in her press conference. She knew we as law enforcement did not agree with the order, and as a result, this was solely her decision.
Wow. You have a sheriff who is standing up to a governor saying, no, not on my watch. I have to salute this man because he's doing the proper constitutional thing. And that is, he is refusing to enforce an unlawful and unconstitutional order. Now, you may think of it as grandstanding, but it's not, really. Because guess who's going to be on the hook if he does enforce it? He's going to be on the hook if he enforces it. Let's suppose he goes out and arrests somebody who's openly carrying and attempts to prosecute them, and the court rightfully decides, no, I'm sorry, this was an unconstitutional order from the get-go. Then what happens? He turns around and sues the sheriff for violating his constitutional rights. And clearly, if you've read the Bruin case, you can't just declare an entire county to be a gun-free zone. You have to narrowly tailor any restriction on the Second Amendment, and that's not what the governor has done here. I am happy to see somebody doing the right thing and standing up. There have been several sheriffs who've come to the news media and said, look, I'm not going to enforce this unlawful order. There were several sheriffs in Illinois who said, we're not going to enforce this unlawful ban on a certain kind of firearm. And that is exactly the right thing to do, because it will take some time for this to be litigated and determined to be unconstitutional, but it is clearly unconstitutional for several reasons. One, as I said before, it's illogical. Criminals do not obey the law. And the sheriff makes this point later on in his conference. He says, this is targeting the law-abiding people. It's not doing anything for the criminal class. And that's true. Did you notice what the governor said during her period of time? She said, this is going to go just for 30 days, but then we might renew it, and we might extend it, and we might keep doing it. Well, you remember what happened during COVID. They just kept renewing it. During the pandemic, California shut down churches for months. It was unconstitutional. It was later ruled to be unconstitutional. But that didn't stop them. If this measure is allowed to go forward, if it's upheld by the courts in any way, instead of immediately stricken, then that's going to happen again and again and again. This 30-day order is going to turn into a 30-year order. Again, it's targeting the wrong people. If you'll pardon the metaphor, they are shooting at the wrong target here. I would give the governor some credit for trying to fix a law enforcement problem without spending money. Because as you probably noticed in the conference, she talked about being resource limited. That's code for I don't have the money to hire more patrol officers. I don't have the money to hire more prosecutors. I don't have a way to put resources on this so that I can fix the problem. Instead, I'm just going to make this blanket order that governs everybody. It's bad public policy. And somebody reminded me the other day in one of the comments that there is always a simple fix for every complex problem. And it's always wrong. And that, my friends, is what we have here in this order. Well, thank you very much for letting me expound on something that's important to me. Please feel free to disagree with me. I realize people think that there need to be more restrictions on firearms. I get that. It's not a good idea because, again, I've actually been the victim of an attempted home invasion, and what kept me safe was my firearm. I know other people who've had similar problems. I go to the range, I train, I spend time with my firearm, I make sure it's in good operating condition, and I carry a high quality firearm that's not going to have an accidental or negligent discharge because it's not a good piece of equipment. I think those are all important things, and those are the things that I teach people when I teach about the law and the Second Amendment. It is my hope that the governor will retreat from this position, and even if they need to put in a special tax in Bernallilo County to fund additional law enforcement and prosecutorial resources, that would be a far more effective and better solution than this one-size-fits-none ban. That's what I have for you today. Thank you very much for watching. Again, feel free to comment and disagree in the comments down below. Like, share, subscribe, and if you have the opportunity today, do something nice for someone. Otherwise, catch me down here at the beach next time. If you like this video, here are a few others you might try, and don't forget to subscribe. Have a terrific day, guys.